When The Godfather premiered in 1972, it didn't just redefine cinema. It ensnared its cast in a real-life drama more haunting than anything Coppola could script. Behind the iconic performances and Oscar glory lies an unsettling truth. For many of its stars, this masterpiece became a cursed blessing. Marlon Brando's Don Vito earned him immortality. Yet he spent his final years in isolation, whispering to empty rooms about Hollywood's cruelty. James Caan's fiery Sonny mirrored his own reckless spirit, a $20 million fortune squandered on bad bets and burned bridges. And John Cazale, whose Fredo broke our hearts, would himself be betrayed by his failing body, dying mid-career in Meryl Streep's arms. These weren't just actors playing mobsters. They became prisoners of their roles, typecast, tormented, and in too many cases, taken too soon. Of the film's sprawling cast, 41 have now passed, their stories whispering warnings about fame's Faustian bargain. So pull up a chair at the Corleone table. We're serving the truth they never wanted you to see about the drugs, the mob ties the families left behind. Because when the cameras stopped rolling, these actors didn't get happy endings. They got funerals. Asterisk, just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. Asterisk, subscribe now, before we make you an offer you can't refuse. On Shadow. The role of Vito Corleone was meant to be Marlon Brando's grand comeback, but instead, it became a gilded cage that trapped him for the rest of his life. Known for his intense dedication to method acting, Brando arrived on set with cotton stuffed in his cheeks, a move that revolutionized how aging was portrayed on screen. He improvised the now iconic cat purring scene, providing the only warmth in an otherwise icy performance. Yet despite the acclaim, he famously refused his Oscar, sending activist Sachin Littlefeather to decline it on his behalf in protest. Brando's personal life often mirrored the tragedies of Vito Corleone. He fathered 11 children, including Christian, who was imprisoned for manslaughter. Seeking refuge from Hollywood's pressures, he bought a secluded hideaway in Tahiti. In his final years, he lived in near isolation, often seen eating ice cream alone at 3 a.m. When Brando passed away in 2004, he left behind a complicated legacy. His will, which initially left most of his assets to his housekeeper, was later overturned. Secret audio tapes later surfaced in which he lamented, "I sold my soul for that damn role." His Oscar statuette was reportedly used as a doorstop. In a haunting twist of fate, his final words, "Why did I waste my life?" echo the betrayal of Fredo in The Godfather. Even in death, Marlon Brando couldn't escape the family business. For James Caan, playing the hot-headed Sonny Corleone in The Godfather wasn't much of a stretch. It was practically autobiographical. A former gang fighter from the Bronx turned method actor who trained alongside Marlon Brando, Caan brought raw authenticity to the role. He famously performed Sonny's brutal tollbooth death scene in a single take, the gunfire effects so convincing that he visibly flinched. But when offered a role in The Godfather Part 2, he declined, saying, "I wasn't doing flashbacks for scale pay." Following his breakout success, Caan's life spiraled into a costly downfall. He gambled away his misery earnings in Las Vegas backrooms. And during the 1980s, his cocaine addiction was so severe he admitted, "I did more lines than scripts." At one point, he went from receiving $50 million film offers to languishing in the world of straight-to-video releases. Redemption came, but only near the end. In 2021, Al Pacino quietly covered Caan's medical expenses. When Caan died, he was found holding his Godfather script, still filled with handwritten notes. His final words to director Francis Ford Coppola were, "Tell them Sonny went out swinging." In a tragic parallel to his on-screen death, James Caan passed away from a massive heart attack, never reaching the age of 83. His real life ending eerily echoing Sonny's bullet-riddled farewell. They called Fredo the weak brother, but in one of Hollywood's cruelest ironies, it was John Cazale, the quiet acting genius behind the role, whose life was cut tragically short. Despite appearing in only 5 films, Cazale achieved a rare feat. Every one of them was nominated for Best Picture, giving him a 100% Oscar-nominated filmography. During the filming of The Deer Hunter, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, yet refused painkillers to remain fully present for his final scenes. Cazale's greatest love story was also one of Hollywood's most forgotten. He lived in a tiny 300-square-foot New York walk-up with Meryl Streep, who stood by him throughout his illness. She cared for him between takes and later said, "He taught me what real acting was." Tragedy followed, even in legacy. Though Francis Ford Coppola wanted to include him in The Godfather Part 3, Cazale was fired by the studio while bedridden. Coppola offered to shoot his scenes first, but the studio refused. John Cazale died on March 12, 1978, just 3 days after Meryl Streep's final visit. As a quiet tribute, Al Pacino buried him in his own Godfather overcoat, the same one Fredo wore in the Lake Tahoe scene, leaving a final, poetic postscript to a life that burned bright and ended too soon. The man who delivered the iconic line, "Leave the gun, take the cannoli," ultimately became a casualty of the very industry his character warned about. Born above his uncle's Italian grocery store in the Bronx, Richard Castellano brought real-life mob encounters to his portrayal of Peter Clemenza, infusing the role with unmatched authenticity. His performance earned him the distinction of being the first actor in the Godfather franchise to receive an Oscar nomination. But after that success came a $500,000 fallout. Castellano demanded script approval for The Godfather Part 2, and even insisted that his wife write all of Clemenza's dialogue. The studio, unwilling to concede, replaced him overnight with a younger version of the character played by Bruno Kirby. What followed was a quiet, unseen tragedy. Castellano spiraled into depression, reportedly gaining over 100 pounds after his firing. He died alone in 1988, surrounded by stacks of unsold Clemenza return scripts in his apartment. His passing was barely acknowledged, his obituaries buried beneath those of his co-stars. Today, the line that made him famous generates over $50,000 a year in merchandise for Paramount, while his grave in North Bergen sits largely forgotten, a symbol of the cannoli curse that marked his fall from grace. When Al Lettieri locked eyes with Marlon Brando across the negotiation table, the fear in Vito Corleone's face wasn't just acting, it was recognition. Before Hollywood, Lettieri had been a real-life enforcer in Queens, and director Francis Ford Coppola cast him as Virgil the Turk Sollozzo after spotting his mugshot in a local crime blotter. He even improvised Sollozzo's Turkish heroine backstory, drawing from actual underworld experience. On set, Lettieri's presence was so intense, it shook even the legends. Brando reportedly demanded armed guards during their shared scenes, and Al Pacino later confessed, "Al made me forget my lines. He smelled like danger." To heighten his performance's authenticity, the studio even brought in real mobsters as consultants. When Lettieri died in 1975, his autopsy revealed the true toll of a life lived too close to the edge. 3 old bullet wounds never officially reported, liver damage from 2 decades of heavy drinking, and just $287 in his pocket. Less than a day's pay for playing Sollozzo. In a haunting final twist, his tombstone bears the name The Turk, the only role anyone remembered, forever blurring the line between the man and the myth. When Don Corleone uttered the chilling line, "Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes," it struck a little too close to reality for Lenny Montana, the towering 6 feet 6 inches ex-wrestler who brought the feared enforcer to life. Known in the 1960s wrestling world as the Brooklyn Brawler, Montana also had a darker side, doing collection work for the Colombo crime family and serving 2 years at Rikers Island for assault. His past followed him straight onto the Godfather set. FBI agents reportedly monitored his trailer, suspicious of meetings during filming. Montana's visibly anxious performance wasn't an act. He later admitted he improvised Brasi's nervousness because that's how I felt talking to real Dons. Even Marlon Brando was uneasy, refusing to rehearse their scene alone with him. Despite his breakout role, Montana's career quickly stalled. He was typecast as thugs and heavies, even though he longed to do comedy. His final gig was a $300 appearance at a mob wedding in Staten Island. When he died, he left behind a pile of unpaid medical bills from old wrestling injuries. In a bittersweet coda, his wrestling boots and brass knuckles were auctioned off for $42,000, 10 times more than he ever earned for playing Luca Brasi. When Tessio quietly muttered, "It's just business," before his execution in The Godfather, no one imagined Abe Vigoda would spend the rest of his life turning his own mortality into a running gag. It all began in 1982, when People magazine mistakenly declared him dead, despite the fact he was very much alive. He leaned into the joke, later appearing in a 1997 SNL skit where he rose from a coffin to correct the rumor, and by age 85, was selling "I'm Still Alive" t-shirts. But behind the humor was a lifetime of irony. Vigoda actually collapsed during his Godfather audition, giving Tessio's frailty a haunting authenticity. Over the next 34 years, he endured countless "is Abe dead?" jokes, once quipping, "My tombstone will say, 'Told you I was sick.'" When he really died in 2016, headlines about his passing were overshadowed by Godfather anniversary retrospectives. Twitter trended with the bittersweet hashtag #NotAgainAbe. Quietly, he left behind a $10 million estate to a cat sanctuary. His true epitaph, though, may be the one fans still remember: "The only man who played dead better than alive." When Johnny Fontane cried out, "I don't know what to do," to Don Corleone, Al Martino wasn't delivering a performance. He was reliving a chapter of his own life shaped by fear and mob interference. In 1952, his chart-topping hit "Here in My Heart" enraged Philadelphia mobsters when he resisted their business arrangements. Threatened and blacklisted, Martino fled to England, only returning to the U.S. after Frank Sinatra reportedly intervened. His casting in The Godfather blurred the line between fiction and reality. Just like Fontaine, Martino's career had been derailed by unseen forces. The infamous studio scene, where Fontaine's fate hangs on a gunpoint negotiation, was eerily drawn from Martino's real experiences. He even kept real bodyguards on set during filming. After the film's success, Martino seized his second chance. He demanded, and received, a 300% pay raise for his brief Godfather Part 2 appearance. In the 1980s, he mounted a Vegas comeback, backed by financial support from sources some say were just as shadowy as the characters he portrayed. He died mid-tour in 2009, still performing Johnny Fontaine's signature tune, "I Have But One Heart," in a poetic final touch. His tombstone plays that very song when visitors approach, an eternal tribute to the man who lived his most iconic role both on screen and off. When Morgana King sang "Look How I've Cried" during Connie Corleone's wedding scene, audiences saw a grieving matriarch, but King was mourning something far more personal: the loss of her jazz career. Cast solely because Francis Ford Coppola heard her haunting voice in a club, she reluctantly took on the role of Mama Corleone. She even refused to wear "gangster grandma" makeup until Marlon Brando personally intervened. Her heartbreaking portrayal of Mama's stroke later in the film was ad-libbed, drawn from memories of her own mother's passing. After The Godfather, King's music career took a detour she never wanted. Jazz clubs began billing her as the original mob wife, much to her dismay. Her 1974 album, A Taste of Honey, was shelved for being too dark, and in an unpublished memoir, she lamented, "They only wanted mob jazz after that." In her final years, King withdrew from the spotlight. She lived in the same modest Palm Springs home for 4 decades, refusing any renovations. Her estate would reveal 300 unreleased recordings, none of them with any mob associations. When she died in March 2018, the exact cause was redacted per her instructions. On her gravestone, a simple, defiant message is etched: "She sang first." It was her final rejection of a legacy she never wanted, and a reminder that before she was Vito's wife, she was a voice the world should have heard more clearly. The man who played Michael Corleone's cold-blooded enforcer, Al Neri, met an end so absurd, even the Godfather writers would have rejected it. Richard Bright, who had trained with Marlon Brando at the Actors Studio and performed Shakespeare between mob roles, became infamous for his chilling line, "It's a Sicilian message." That line, like much of his career, was improvised, a testament to his raw talent. After The Godfather, Bright became typecast as the stoic guy who kills for Pacino, appearing in 11 films in similar roles. His final film role was hauntingly fitting, playing a hitman named Neri in 2005. His last journal entry read, "I became the curse I portrayed." Then came the bizarre twist of fate. In February 2006, Bright was struck by a bus while crossing 8th Avenue to buy oranges, a scene eerily reminiscent of young Vito Corleone's own tragic moment. He died with a Godfather Part 4 script in his bag, a project that never came to fruition. An eyewitness later remarked, "He looked relieved when it hit," in a fittingly ironic final tribute. His memorial service was held at the Genco Olive Oil Factory, the real-life setting for the Corleone family's business. It was the only place that felt like home, even as his life ended in a way that would have seemed too strange for fiction. 50 years after The Godfather premiered, its most haunting scene wasn't written into the script. It was the slow, tragic unraveling of the actors who brought it to life. The price of immortality was steep for many of the film's iconic stars, who found their lives marked by the very roles that cemented their place in cinematic history. Marlon Brando's Oscar, once the pinnacle of his career, ended up relegated to the status of a doorstop. James Caan's portrayal of Sonny Corleone, filled with fiery rage, burned through his career and left him with a legacy that could never fully live up to his early promise. John Cazale's portrayal of Fredo, though brief, lingers in the shadows of cinema, with his tragic eyes still watching from beyond the grave. While the studio raked in millions, the actors paid the price for their fame. Richard Castellano died penniless, his legacy forever tied to the cannoli line. Al Lettieri's real-life mob ties were exploited to give his character authenticity, only to be discarded once his performance had served its purpose. Abe Vigoda, once a respected actor, became the subject of cruel jokes rather than a legend. As the last survivors, Al Pacino and Robert Duvall, begin to fade, we are left with ghosts. Morgana King's unheard jazz, Richard Bright's unfinished Part 4 script, and Lenny Montana's auction brass knuckles. The curse of the Corleone family, it seems, outlived the credits, forever haunting the lives of those who brought it to life.